This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Cherished Companions with Doug Wilber from, and I said that wrong again. You know, Doug, there's something about this show that I get the name of it wrong. It is Care Notes with Doug Wilber from Cherished Companions. So hopefully you all know what the name of the show is. And before we got online, Doug and I were talking about, health issues and, how we take care of ourselves. And what I find interesting, Doug, is sometimes when I go to the doctor and they'll say to me, you do take your blood pressure regularly, don't you? And you look at them and you go, no.
Blink, blink.
Yeah, it's like, am I supposed to be doing that? And then I was just at a doctor's appointment the other day, and thank God I'm finally losing weight again. And they said, and you weigh yourself regularly, don't you? No. And I never thought these were important things. So help me out because, as I'm getting older, I want to make sure I'm taking care of myself.
Yeah, that's actually really kind of a good segue into, what I wanted to talk today about. There's an old saying, I don't know if you remember it, and it was like, the difference between men and boys is the cost and size of their toys.
Right, exactly.
But what I want to talk about is having the right equipment when it comes to doing care. And the funny thing is that there is equipment out there that can make life very, very good for someone who is trying to do care, and which we use all the time. And so I think the purpose of this is twofold. One is to let people know that there's a good reason why you want to hire a professional company, because we'll tend to use this equipment the right way and things, but also because families can really benefit from that. So I'll give an example. I went into a client yesterday, and we were talking, and they were trying to figure out how to do something in the bathroom, and it really had to do with getting into the shower. And I said, well, maybe what we need to do here is, because there's a wheelchair, there was the shower chair, would be to use a slide board. And that might be the way to be able to get the transfer so that the person can go over it. And interesting enough, is the person I was talking to said, oh my gosh, I have a slide board. I used to use it when the individual we were talking about had to get in and out of the car, and that was something.
Okay.
But as this person got stronger and stronger, they no longer really needed it, so it just sat in the car. But it was a tool, it was a solution to overcoming a problem. Well, when we're dealing with a home, one of the things I always tell people is there is a way we can do care in almost every situation if we have the equipment. But if you don't have the equipment, we may end up, having real problems or real struggles. And so I said, so part of it is doing an analysis and saying what equipment is needed. And so maybe, without kind of talking too much longer about the general concept, talk about some of the equipment that is out there.
Absolutely.
So maybe we'll start with a slide board. A slide board is a board. Sometimes it's actually physical wood, and sometimes it's made out of a plastic material that kind of bridges a gap. It's long and narrow, and it kind of looks like a board with tapered ends, and you can use that as a bridge, and that's really what it's used. A bridge from one place where you're sitting to another place that you're sitting. So it's oftentimes used in a place like you bring a wheelchair up to the car. You need to get this person in the car, and that person really is not able to effectively lift themselves up. So
Sure.
you bridge this car seat with the wheelchair, and the person is able to scoot, or you're able to scoot that person into the car. Voila, you are able to now have effective means to get someone in and out of the car if they don't have the strength to bear weight. So transfers is one of the things where there are lots of different types of equipment to get a person from one place
Sure.
to another, or one seat to another, or whatnot. So maybe we'll start with talking about people, because we talked about the slide board, people who are not able to really bear weight, or who can't bear weight and balance at the same time.
Sure.
So, what do you do in those situations? Well, one of the primary things, the tools that we use, is a gait belt. A gait belt is a belt that almost looks like the old-fashioned Boy Scout belts,
Right.
type
Yep.
of thing. They go around the waist a little bit wider, and the purpose of that is to give you leverage when you're transferring someone. That's one of the reasons that you would use it. Another reason is someone's ambulating, and you're holding on to that. So if they start losing, their balance, or losing the strength in their legs, you can either correct that, or you can help control lowering that person to the floor using leverage for it. So there are multiple purposes for the gait belt, but it's essentially in helping to do with either transfers or in ambulation.
Sure.
Another great tool, if someone is not bearing weight, is some sort of a lift. And there are multiple types of lifts that are out there. And we use a lot of these. So one of the types of lifts that are there is a Hoyer lift, and many people have heard of that. And the standard Hoyer is basically, it's almost like a little crane that you can use in the house, and someone is in almost like a hammock that they sit in, and you can move that from one place to another. And typically, especially in a home setting, you are literally just moving someone from, say, the bed to the wheelchair that's right
Sure.
next to that. You're not wheeling them down the halls or doing different
Right.
things like that, because safety concerns. So I think sometimes they'll do more of the wheeling and other things in a hospital setting or in other settings. My belief is, we do it basically to transfer from one place to another.
Right.
Well, what if someone is, there's some downsides to a Hoyer lift. The person feels out of control at times because of they're in a hammock and it swings a little, and it's has other downsides. It's not real easy to toilet someone when they're in a Hoyer lift. So there is a thing called a sit to stand Hoyer, or a sit to stand lift. And basically what that does is, when someone can bear some weight with their legs, but they're not quite there to be able to bear weight and balance. And so what it'll do is basically take someone from a sitting position. Let's say they're sitting on a bed, you wrap the strap around them, and then you have this mechanism that lifts them into a standing type of position. And so it's great in a lot of ways because they can bear weight. that strengthens their legs. And, you're able to move them onto a toilet much easier than you would
Sure.
with a regular Hoyer. And so there's a lot of ways that that particular lift, and you don't feel like as much like you're hanging in, in some sort of a swing
Sure.
or a hammock, and for doing it. So most patients would definitely, if they had a choice,
Choose that.
prefer
Absolutely.
using something like that. And so those are, then there are other things like there's a pivot board where someone can stand on a board and do, but almost like you're of the age that you may remember it. There used to be this thing called a twisted, where
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, it's a little
Yeah.
thing that had ball bearings in it and it would
Right.
turn. Well, this is a way that if you could get someone and they bear some weight, but it's hard for them to shuffle their feet, you can kind of turn them using this pivot board, and it actually turns where you're able to get them so they're positioned one way, and then you can pivot a different way, and a lot of them
Sure.
have something that they can actually hold on to. So the great thing about that is why do you use that? Why don't we just lift someone up and do it? Well, when you're trying to deadlift someone is likely to get hurt,
Right.
and potentially more than one person. And the first person that could get hurt is the care recipient. And then the second person is the caregiver, whoever
Right.
that is, whether that's a professional caregiver or a family member. And that's where, one of the things that we do, and I'll go and step back a little bit. We train our people on how to use these things. So we actually have a transfer class that is led by our nurse, who is absolutely amazing at knowing how to do these things, and on how to help someone ambulate, and how to do the different things that are involved in transfers or or lifts, things along those lines, so that they use the equipment the right way. So it's
Exactly.
and really it's not only just use it the right way, but optimize how it can be used, and which is also very important. Not only doing it right, but like doing it in a way that you get the most out of it, because sometimes people don't realize what you can do with that equipment.
Exactly.
So, and that's again part of the reason why having a professional caregiver can make a difference oftentimes when you're doing that. So, by talking about this, I guess in the end of this part, it's really understanding this is, if you have a need, we live in a wonderful time. And one of the most important parts about this is, if you realize someone's probably invented something for this problem,
Exactly.
and which is really cool. Like Google stuff. I Google things all the time. I'll say, try to figure out something. And every once in a while I'll get surprised by someone telling me about a piece of equipment the other day I had never heard about. And the great thing about it, and unfortunately that particular piece of equipment has been discontinued. And so you can't find it anymore. But it was a really good piece of equipment,
Yeah.
and this family has found it to be extremely helpful to have it. But at least I was able to look it up and say, oh yeah, I see what this is. I understand, what this even does, to to really get
Sure.
it. So let's go to ambulation. That was transfers. Let's talk a little bit about ambulation. Well, how do people ambulate? The first thing is they ambulate by walking, and then, but then what if someone needs something more? Well, frequently you see someone will graduate to a cane, and then from a cane maybe to a walker, and then there's 1,000 different walkers. There's walkers that have wheels on them. There's walkers that don't
Yep.
have the wheels, and you slide it along or you lift it up, or whatever. And so and each of those actually have different purposes. So a wheeled one, where they have a seat, oftentimes it's called a rollator. And it's great because someone can walk around, and if they get tired, there's something that they can then sit on.
Right.
And in a pinch, you could actually use it as almost like a mini wheelchair,
Right.
for that person, push them around. And but know that that the one type of walker may be perfect for one person, but it may not be the right thing for another person.
Right.
And but they have that's like, they have walkers that are like Mercedes Benz. They're really lightweight, and they have all sorts of features that are really good. And again, there may be a reason or a purpose for that.
Sure.
Wheelchairs, a lot of times people think about wheelchairs, and there's two different types of well, there's more than two, but two big types of wheelchair people think of. One is a transport chair. That's narrower. So sometimes I come into a house, they say, we can't get, grandpa into the bathroom. They have a big wheelchair with the big wheels on the side. Right. And yeah, it won't fit in, but there are a transport chair, which has the small wheels, which are oftentimes meant to be used, like throw in the back of your car and you can push it around if you're going to the mall or something. Right. And that's why I think originally they were probably called a transport chair, because they're lightweight, easy to use, and but that's not powered by the individual. Sure. Who have the big wheels, which is what people would use to move around. And those transport chairs, fortunately, are narrower. So oftentimes, a lot of the houses that are built in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s had really narrow doors.
Sure.
Like you were wondering, first of all, it was definitely a different era, because we're a much bigger people than we were.
Yes,
then.
We are.
so but the doors were really not handicap accessible, and so being able to have something that's narrower, and that's part of the thing that you have to think about is like, okay, this doesn't work. Is there something else we can do short of tearing down the door and things? And there have been times where the doors have been so narrow and the need has been such that what we've had to do is take the door off the hinges, and then that gives just enough room for something. Wow. to go in. Or even they have a little block of wood that go on the inside of the jamb.
Right. Yep.
And there have been times where you just take that off, and then it gives you the clearance that you need to go in. But where there's a will, there's a way. There's a
Absolutely.
way. Yeah. Really think through the problem and how can we do this to make this work. And there have been very, very few situations over the years where we haven't come up with a solution. No.
Well, and you're giving us some really good reasons why, when we or our parents, any of our loved ones, need to be cared for, we think, oh, we can do it. Okay. I just have to make sure that they stay dry, that they eat and whatever. And then all of a sudden it comes up to something like this, that, you're trying to take them from the bed into the bathroom, and like the person either can't walk or for whatever reason needs more assistance than even you can give them. And I remember when my mother first came home from the hospital, um, they had said, let's keep her as limber as possible. Well, she was blind, but didn't know
Mhm.
it. And I can't tell you how many times I tried to help her out of bed to go into the bathroom. And she had no concept of even her feet touching the ground
Yeah.
because her senses were all off. And, um, I called the doctor right away and I said, we can't do it this way. And then he, got us, um, a potty chair to put next to her bed, and it didn't work either. And
Right.
that's when we finally realized that either I couldn't help her with that, we had to get somebody else, or we had to find other alternatives. And it took us about 2 days to sit down with our healthcare workers to say, what's the best way of doing this? And
Right.
most of us as family members, we have no idea.
Right. Well, and you actually bring up a really good point because, you know, our mind is very efficient. So, most of the time people are not learning. They focus in to learn things that are relevant, that are pertinent, to what they're going through. So you don't really pay attention. Well, many people don't pay attention to what cars are out there until they want to buy a car. And
Right,
then they pay attention. They figure out, I never think about a mattress until I need a mattress. And
right,
then all of a sudden, those commercials you see on TV become relevant. But otherwise, it gets very efficiently filtered out of my mind in almost all circumstances because I don't need that, and so the same thing with dealing with someone who is going that all of a sudden has physical needs. You have to learn that on the quick because your mind has largely filtered that out unless you're in healthcare or
sure.
or some other reason where you needed to know, and otherwise you're not really paying attention, you're not really focusing in on that. Now with your mom, did you actually, um like you were talking about, her need and getting up, had you gotten a hospital bed by that point
So
in time?
we had a hospital bed,
Okay.
um, and we had a wheelchair. And the first day, because my brother and a couple cousins were around, plus the healthcare workers, the first day we got her into the wheelchair so that we took her into the living room. And it was such a chore
Yeah.
because the healthcare workers were trying to show us the best way to do it. There was my mother who was so confused, had no idea why, in her mind, I'll just go sit in the chair. And it was like,
Right.
it's not going to happen. Um, and then we noticed when she was sitting in the chair, because she had been in bed for so long, that she was slipping off the chair.
It lost her core strength
Right.
probably, right? Yeah.
And, I just kept thinking, I'm going to be with her most of the time. How am I going to deal with that?
Yeah.
And so those were the things that we started noticing. But I will tell you, the first set of caregivers kept saying, well, you're just going to have to manage. And that's when my brother and I looked at each other and said, these people are not the best for what we need right now. Because yes, I'm going to have to manage, but I'm going to have to understand how to manage.
Right.
Um, and that was the difference. And once
Yeah,
we got the right people in, and they basically said, your mom doesn't know the difference between being in the bed and being in the chair. Let's not transfer her because it's aggravating to her. And so we learned what we could do. Um, and we learned how caregivers all have a little different technique of their own on how they do things.
right. Yeah, and the other thing that I think is relevant to what you were saying, at least for a wider group, is the idea of you know the of customizing and figuring out what the need is, and in your case, what your mom's need was, and then tailoring whatever you were needing or she was needing based
Right.
on that. And that's really what the equipment is based on. The big, one of the things I do find though is that people have trouble adapting, whether it be that caregivers that you're just going to have to kind of
Yeah.
live with this, or a family member. I cannot tell you the number of times that family members are resistant to something like a hospital bed. And, because mom should sleep in her own bed, she's going to want to sleep in her own bed. Well, but, the issue around this, and I understand that. I understand how, how that mindset is and how easy it is to fall into it. It's the same mindset, honestly, that says, oh, I don't want to put that bar in the bathroom because it's going to mess up the tile. But no, you can make it look attractive. You
Right.
can do something so that it's not, an eyesore. But that's not an option. You need that. Someone may need to hold on to that bar, and handheld shower, things like that that are not just like nice to have. Those are, you need that. That's a bottom line type of a thing for some people. And if they don't have it, their risk of falling or having other issues can raise
Right.
up significantly. But the hospital bed, going back to it, so often people say, mom's not going to want it, and or I don't want this. But having a hospital bed, the reason why you would want a hospital bed, if someone really has, I'm not saying everyone who needs care needs a hospital bed, actually in most cases they don't, but let's say it gets to that point where they do. Let's say someone needs to have bed baths, or needs help with incontinence care, or is a fall risk for whatever reason. With a hospital bed, you can raise and lower the height of the bed, so you can get that person at the right height
Right.
in order to stand up, let's say, to be able to pivot. Or you can lower the bed low to the ground so that, if they try to get up at night, they're not likely to fall a distance,
Right.
or not be able to really get up in to fall. So it can be highly protective of someone. You can get a Hoyer lift, say, under a hospital bed, where you might not be able to do that in a regular bed. Or you can, if someone has COPD or something, you can get the back of the bed at an angle
Right.
in order to be able to allow that person to breathe easier. There are 1,000 reasons why it might be the appropriate thing based on the condition. And if you don't have it, it will potentially be a problem. Someone may fall, or, the caregiver, whether it be a family member or someone that you've hired in, could potentially be injured. And
Right.
so, there have been times where I've had to tell a family, if we don't have a hospital bed, we won't be able to be in here. And it's not because I'm being harsh. It's because it may be essential to people's safety. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so and that's why sometimes you also have to have a mindset of, we will get the equipment, we will do what we need to do, because our end goal is to keep the person at home. And it's not always going to be perfect. If you had that perfect house, that, and you had the dream of what, the furniture has to go this way and whatever, you're going to have to sometimes give that up. And it's hard, and that's sometimes some of the resistance towards equipment is, I don't want that in my house. I don't want to see that, and yet it can be, a godsend, a lifesaver. I'll
Absolutely.
kind of finish up with one of the things that is oftentimes used, and that is like a lift chair. A lift chair is phenomenal, because sometimes people, just like your mom, may not have had that core strength. And so if you can get someone into a lift chair, you might be able to position the feet so they don't slide out, or get them to a standing position so that you're not having to try to lift them up and risk, either you
Sure.
or them, getting injured. And but I've seen some resistance even there, where someone will say, well, that doesn't exactly match my other furniture, and say, there are 1,000 lift chairs. If you want to go and get the perfect match, you can find that match. But this is, something that's needed. And,
Exactly.
so in the end, the equipment is going to be one of those things that will make a difference on how well someone is able to do at home. And funny thing is, most of the equipment is very inexpensive. It's not like you're spending a lot of money on this, but the advantage that it has in safety and creating a better environment for the person needing care, and for just lightening the load on the primary caregivers that are there, whether again that's family or professional,
Sure.
can be amazing. um, I'll leave with this idea, and that is, um, don't allow, if the equipment is needed, get it, period. uh, Rely on people who actually have the understanding experience. Draw on that, like a home care company such as ours, or the physical therapist, or a nurse,
Absolutely.
or the different professionals that are coming in. Find out what will make a difference, and learn from that vast experience that folks have. um, and and then be willing to get that in so that it will make a difference, because in the end, that will keep the person that wants to be home, at home, and and so in a way that they can hopefully thrive, not just kind of exist. So,
Exactly. And, one of the things that we also learned um, was putting it out to the community, the things that we were looking for. Um,
oh,
because my mother had a walker,
yeah,
but she obviously could not use it anymore. And so we sort of put it out in her where she was living. And we actually made a trade because somebody needed a walker. Um, and they had a wheelchair from their spouse that they didn't need. And we said, when we're done with it, we'll be more than glad to give it back. Okay. And so these were the little things that we picked up on ourselves.
yeah,
Um, and we never questioned the hospital bed. We just knew from her being in the hospital, how do you take her home and put her in her own bed? She's going to roll over and be on the floor.
right,
Um,
yeah,
so, and I'm one of those people that want things to match, but
yeah.
I'll tell you, I want my loved one to be comfortable, and I want to be doing the right thing for them rather than worrying about if the chair matches the rest of my design.
Well, and the reality is, if you're creative, you can help to make it so that it looks nice and fits in. But the priority is not that you have the perfect house. The
Right.
priority is the person, and it has to be the person. And when you think about it, you'll come to that conclusion. Um, you just have to overcome some of that, like, I want this, absolutely a certain way. And it actually, in many ways, this sounds funny, but is liberating, because you have, when you put your priorities in order, um, you know, life tends to be better, because you're really seeing, the big picture, and not just, a small piece.
Absolutely. At this point, I'm almost sorry I didn't take pictures of what we had to do to my mother's small apartment,
Yeah.
because when people hear, what do you mean you like stacked beds on top of each other so you could put the hospital bed in? Karen, how did you do that? And was like, you know what? I didn't even think about it. That's what we had to do, and we did it. Would I
Yeah.
want to live that way the rest of my life? Not particularly, but temporarily, that's what we did. So I
Yeah, and
totally
I'm sure you've never regretted keeping your mom
oh, no.
and
I mean, it was like
caring for her the way she was cared for,
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that if you can end life, with very few regrets, it's much better. And if you say, yeah, I'm glad that I did what I did, and I'm glad that I sacrificed what I did, sacrifice. But again, on the positive note, we live in really wonderful times. And so it
Absolutely.
is so awesome. Yeah, if you are like saying, I wonder if there's something, there is. Okay. Like, um, someone has thought about it, and they have very, very likely created it. I'll finish by just saying one last thing. I went to a client's home, and she had found this bed that was like something I had never seen before. And it was just, the bed would actually turn, it would stand the person up like a lift chair.
Wow.
And, I said, I've never seen anything like this. She said, well, you know, I was trying to figure out what my loved one needed, figure out with his conditions, he needed this, and this. And she said that that she started researching, and she found this thing in England. So she actually imported it from England, and it was crazy, because with the condition he had, it was a very unique condition. And the fact that he was able to do as well as he was able to do, because she had found that piece of equipment, made it possible for him to be home for a very, very long time and still be ambulatory. And so it made her life as the primary caregiver
Sure.
much, much, much better. So that's just kind of thoughts.
Well, again, this is Karen Oates with Cherish Companions, and we've learned a lot, and we'll put as much of this in the show notes as possible, but we always put in how to reach Doug Wilber. And if you have any questions, please contact Cherish Companions. Have a great day. We'll
Sure.
see you next month.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.